remember when I was a high school student back in Ohio, I was in my AP government class. There was somebody in my class, a Republican, he said one day, in all seriousness, he said, why don't we just start shooting all the immigrants, right? All these illegal immigrants in this country, all these 20 million people, why don't we just shoot them, right? They have no rights, right? They came here illegally, they're not people. Why doesn't the government pay us to start shooting them? He wasn't joking, he was completely serious. Now, I was horrified that someone could be filled with that kind of hate, think that just 20 million people should just be exterminated. But to him, these people from Mexico or Central America were not humans. They had no rights, they were just the others. And when I heard my classmates say these things, I felt deeply saddened because the fact that he could be so full of hate, it showed that not only had he dehumanized these undocumented workers, but in the process he had also dehumanized himself. His rational mind, the part of the human species which took us from tribes in the woods to space travel and iPhones, this part of his brain had been suppressed. His primitive, animalistic, and hateful instincts had been unleashed and allowed to take charge. The entire story of human civilization has been a struggle between the rational and the irrational, the sane and the insane, the progressive and the reactionary. Sometimes this battle goes on between countries and cultures, sometimes it goes on within a country, sometimes it takes place within individuals themselves. I think we all have forces of light and darkness within us. In times of progress, it's human reason, logic, love, and creativity that have the upper hand. But in times of darkness, it's greed, aggression, hate, and hedonism that take charge. We hear so much, part of the reason I really wanted to have this debate was we hear so much nowadays, people talk about horseshoes and bell curves, and they try to say that people like Invictus and people like me are exactly the same. I disagree. Yes, both communism and fascism arrive during times of political crisis. They become a rising political trend. Yes, both fascism and communism involve mass mobilizations of the population. Yes, both fascist and communist regimes engage a repression of their political enemies. But the question that must be asked is, for what purpose? When one looks at the fascists of Italy, the Ku Klux Klan of this country, the Nazis of Germany, you'll see a display of sadism and aggression. Yes, they'll talk about restoring the homeland, Christian brotherhood, National Socialism. That's all secondary. The tone of a genuinely fascist regime, not of right-wingers and traditionalists like Invictus, but of genuine fascists, the tone that they display is go get them, beat them down, kill them, hang them high. Fascism is the psychology of lynch mobs. Fascism is a mass movement appealing to the paranoia and the fear of people who are suffering, and transforming that fear into an uncontrolled violent rage. Hitler took power in 1933, and immediately afterwards there's an upsurge of violence and terror. The communists and socialists were put into prison camps, books were burned, chaos reigned in the German streets. But by 1934, even Hitler had had enough of that. The SA, or the stormtroopers, the violent, hateful street thugs who had mobilized to bring him to power, were smashed. Gregor Strasser, Ernst Röhm, and other hateful fanatics who actually believed in the doctrine of National Socialism were executed in the night of the long knives. The Nazi regime had come to power promising some kind of glorious Heideggerian conservative revolution. But after a year or so of mob chaos and repression, the stormtroopers were replaced by the Gestapo. The regime that took power in an orgy of fascist hate on the street, it became essentially what the bankers who had funded Hitler, like Hallemer Schacht, wanted all along: a cold Prussian military police state. The gas chambers of Auschwitz weren't operated by bloodthirsty Nazi fanatics, but rather by cold, trembling, terrified people who'd been stripped of their humanity and lost their very ability to make rational and moral choices or to question the orders that they were being given. I promised you all some props. I actually brought with me, this is the fasces. This is the symbol of the Italian Fascist Party. It actually comes from ancient Rome. It's where the word fascism comes from. As you can see, now there's a bundle of rods, and that symbolizes unity. And unity is good, right? We want people to come together, but what is it surrounding? It's surrounding an axe. And that's the essence of fascism. Fascism is bringing people together, mobilizing them to destroy, to kill, to murder, and to tear things down. And of course, this may be predictable, but I also brought with me this symbol, which I'm sure we've all seen before. Now, this looks kind of scary because it's a little outdated. I know a lot of people, they see this and they think that looks like a sword or a scimitar or a curved knifey thing. Well, this is actually, it's a sickle. This was something people used for the purpose of making food, growing wheat. And we all know what a hammer is. A hammer is an industrial tool. It's used for production and creating. The hammer and the sickle, the hammer was for the industrial working class. The sickle was for the peasantry. Yes, communism has involved repression, but that repression was secondary. Communism is an ideology about construction, not destruction. It's about marching forward. It's about building. It's about advancing and creating greater prosperity, abundance, and equality. The communists had a lot to do with civil rights. We often hear about the lynching of Emmett Till. 1954, a young African-American man allegedly whistled at a white woman. He was lynched. The people who did it were put on trial, found not guilty. Well, the mother of Emmett Till, she took the corpse of Emmett Till and she allowed it to be photographed. And the Soviet Union took that picture and they sent it all over the world. And they said, the USA says it's the homeland of freedom and democracy. This is what they do. This is what they do. And it was the pressure put on the United States that forced the northern wing of the Democratic Party to start having a conversation about getting rid of Jim Crow segregation. A lot of Vietnam veterans have contempt for leftists and protesters. They'll say, these communists, who are they? Un-Americans, spit on me. Well, if it wasn't for Communist Party members like James W. Ford and the historic 1931 bonus march, in which thousands of veterans occupied the Capitol, we wouldn't have veterans' benefits today. Those were won as a result of struggles led by communists. When Invictus speaks of communists as globalists, he seems to not realize that there's really no contradiction between patriotism and internationalism. Patriotism is about loving your own country. It's not about hating somebody else's. To truly love American workers, American farmers, American children, American retirees, American families, is to want them to live a decent life, free of tyranny and poverty. And realizing that means recognizing that even though you love them and you're loyal to them, they don't exist in a vacuum. They exist as part of one international working class, a class that faces one international dangerous enemy of Wall Street monopolists and profiteers. I say that the liberation of American workers, American farmers, American children, and American families will only come about through creating a new country, and in doing so, standing arm in arm with our class brothers and sisters on every continent. Thank you.